Welcome to our video with 3 spine-tingling tales that will leave you on the edge of your seat. If you're a fan of the macabre and enjoy a good scare, then you're in for a treat. These are not your run-of-the-mill ghost stories or urban legends. No, these are real accounts from real people who have experienced unexplainable and downright terrifying events. So sit back, turn off the lights, and get ready to experience 3 tales that will make your blood run cold. But be warned, these stories are not for the faint of heart. They contain graphic descriptions of horror and may leave you questioning what lurks in the darkness. Are you ready to face your fears? Then let's begin. I've always loved going for walks in the woods. It's a great way to clear your head and get some exercise. But I never expected to stumble upon an abandoned graveyard. It was a warm summer night, and I was taking my usual stroll through the woods. I've been to this area 100 times, but this time I saw something I'd never seen before. In the distance, I saw an old gate and decided to check it out. As I approached the gate, I could see that it led to an overgrown path. I felt an odd sensation come over me as I walked down the path. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something felt off. The path eventually led to an abandoned graveyard, and as soon as I saw it, I got chills down my spine. The graveyard was filled with old tombstones, and I could tell that it had been abandoned for quite some time. I wondered who was buried here, and why it had been left to rot. As I walked through the graveyard, I noticed that some of the tombstones had names of prisoners of war on them. I immediately felt a sense of sadness and wondered what their lives had been like. Suddenly, I heard a rustling noise and I spun around, trying to figure out what it was. I couldn't see anything, so I tried to shrug it off and continue exploring the graveyard. But then, something pushed me hard from behind and I stumbled forward, hitting my head on a tombstone. I was disoriented, and my heart was racing as I tried to figure out what had happened. I thought maybe it was just the wind or some kind of animal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew something was not right. I decided that I needed to leave immediately and started to make my way back to the gate, but as I turned around, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The ghostly figures of prisoners of war appearing before me. They were all shackled and had bruises all over their bodies. Soldiers were hitting them with chains and they were crying out in pain. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like I had been transported back in time to witness this horrifying scene. I wanted to run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the ground. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and my hands were shaking. I knew that I needed to get out of there, but I couldn't move. The prisoners of war and soldiers seemed to be getting closer and closer, and I was sure that I was going to die. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I screamed out in terror. But when I turned around, there was no one there. I knew that it was time to go, and I ran as fast as I could towards the gate. I did not look back until I was safely out of the woods. The next day, I tried to find the graveyard again, but it was nowhere to be found. I asked around, but nobody seemed to know anything about it. It was like it had never existed, but I know what I saw that night, and I'll never forget it. It was a terrifying experience that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind of night that sends shivers down your spine. The wind was howling outside and the snow was coming down hard. My siblings and I were sitting in the living room watching the classic movie Titanic while our parents were out of town. Our Uncle Ron was watching us, but he had already fallen asleep in his chair. Little did we know we were about to experience a night that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. As we watched the movie, the power flickered and went out for a brief moment. We reset the VCR and continued watching, but something felt off. My younger brother got up to go to the bathroom, and on his way back, he noticed something strange outside. He called us over to take a look, and what we saw, we will never forget. There were footprints in the snow leading up to the back door of our house and into our window. The window was slightly ajar, and my brother swore he heard a doorknob turn. Our sister was freaking out and wanted to wake up our uncle, but we were all too curious to see where the footprints had led. We bundled up in our winter coats and boots and followed the footprints into the snowstorm. The deeper we got into the woods, the more ominous the atmosphere became. The footprints were getting deeper, indicating that whoever made them was carrying something heavy now. We finally came upon a cabin tucked away in the woods. It was dark inside, but we could see a faint light coming from a single room. The footsteps led to the front door of the cabin, but we were too scared to approach it. Instead, we crept over to the closet window and peered inside. What we saw made our blood stop. There was a figure sitting at the table, hunched over and shrouded in darkness. We couldn't make out any features, but we knew we were not alone. Suddenly, there were 2 thumps from inside the cabin, followed by the sound of something sliding. We didn't see what caused the sound, but it was clear that someone or something was inside with us. One of my brothers screamed and pointed behind us, and when we turned to see a head poking out from another window of the cabin. We couldn't see any features, just a pair of dark, empty eyes staring back at us. Suddenly, the head disappeared from view, and we heard rapid thumping sounds from inside the cabin. We screamed and ran back toward our house, following the footprints in the snow. We were terrified, but we didn't feel like we were being chased. We finally made it back to the safety of our home, but we knew that we were not alone in those woods. The next day, we tried to find the cabin again with our Uncle Ron, but it was nowhere to be found. We searched for hours, but it was like it had never existed at all. To this day, we still don't know what we saw in that cabin, but know that it was something that should have stayed hidden in the darkness. I can hardly believe what I experienced a few years ago while hiking in the woods of New Hampshire. As an adventurous person, I love to explore abandoned houses, and that's exactly what I stumbled upon during my hike. The house appeared to be deserted, surrounded by overgrown grass and tree limbs that had fallen, making it difficult to get to the porch. The front porch was small and made of bricks covered with moss. The front door was locked from the inside, and the windows on the front of the house were covered in a thick layer of dust and dirt. I couldn't resist exploring the house and decided to check the back door, hoping it would be unlocked. When I gave it a slight push, I could feel the frame was loose and weak, and it didn't take much to force the door open, breaking the frame. I knew it was wrong to break and enter, but my curiosity got the best of me, and I couldn't just walk away without knowing what was inside. As soon as I stepped inside, I was struck by an eerie silence and an overwhelming feeling that something wasn't right. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, and the house seemed to be stuck in time. I was standing in a kitchen, complete with dirty dishes in the sink, a drain board with old cups and glasses turned upside down, covered in a thick layer of dust. There was a small kitchen table with drinking glasses on it, and a newspaper that dated back to June of 1959. The cabinets were stocked with dishes, and there was a tall pantry that contained various jars of preserves, fruits, and veggies that had obviously been canned by hand. Everything was covered in dust, and spiderwebs covered the entire house. I continued to walk through the house and found each room completely furnished and covered in dirt and dust. There were dresser drawers with clothes that had been chewed and nested in by what I assume were mice. In the closet hung clothes that had begun to deteriorate and had holes from insects. The 2 bedrooms were perfectly made up, one of which was obviously a room for children with 2 twin beds. The bedding was in poor condition, but it seemed to be hand-stitched. At this point, I started to feel as if I was being watched and could sense a chilling presence. I had an inexplicable feeling of unease, but couldn't figure out why. As I walked through the short hallway that led back to the living room area, I decided to see what kind of pictures were hanging on the walls. I wiped some of the dust off one of the pictures hanging near the doorway of what appeared to be the parents' bedroom and discovered it was a photo of a wedding. The photo was very faded and appeared to have some type of mildew growing behind the glass. As I continued to explore the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I started to feel like I wasn't alone, like there was someone or something in the house with me. It was as if the spirits of the family that once lived here were still lingering, watching my every move. I made my way to the bathroom, which was also covered in dust and cobwebs. The cabinet had a few toiletries, a straight edge razor, and towels that were neatly folded but had now become nests for small animals. It was as if the family had just vanished into thin air, leaving everything behind. As I turned to leave the bathroom, I heard a noise coming from the hallway. It sounded like footsteps, but they were light and quick like a child's. I froze, unable to move, and the footsteps continued, getting closer and closer. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the hallway and I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun around, but there was no one there. I was completely alone, yet the feeling of being watched persisted. It was then that I realized that I wasn't alone in the house. The spirits of the family that once lived there were still here, haunting the house and the memories they left behind. I quickly made my way to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. I tried to force it open, but it was like it had been bolted shut from the outside. Panic set in, and I started to feel trapped. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, and I could hear whispers, faint and barely audible, but there nonetheless. It was as if the family was trying to communicate with me, to warn me of something. I was too scared to find out. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. When I opened my eyes, I saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was a ghostly figure of a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned dress, with her hair in a bun. She was holding a small baby in her arms and was looking right at me, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare. The woman just disappeared as suddenly as she had appeared, and I was left alone in the silent, abandoned house. I knew then that I had to leave, that I couldn't stay there any longer. I made my way back to the broken door and fled the house, never looking back. To this day, I can't forget the feeling of being watched, of being trapped in that house with spirits of the family that once lived there. It was as if they were trying to tell me something, to warn me of some impending danger. I don't know what it was, but I know that I never want to experience it again.